नमस्कार, मैं हूं आशुतोष और आप देख रहे हैं सत्य हिंदी। सत्य हिंदी के विशेष कार्यक्रम आशुतोष की बात में आपका स्वागत है। बातचीत शुरू करने के पहले एक छोटी सी अपील। सत्य हिंदी एक कोशिश है ईमानदार, निडर और निर्भीक पत्रकारिता की। हम अपने उन लाखों दर्शकों के शुक्रगुजार हैं जो लाखों की संख्या में हमारे कार्यक्रमों को देखते हैं और हमारी हौसला अफजाई करते हैं। हम उनसे एक और छोटी सी गुजारिश करना चाहते हैं कि आप न केवल हमारे कार्यक्रम देखें, बल्कि संभव हो सके तो हमारे वीडियोस को बड़ी मात्रा में डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करें, सर्कुलेट करें और शेयर करें, ताकि ईमानदार पत्रकारिता ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोगों तक पहुंचे। ऐसे समय में जबकि ईमानदारी से ईमानदार पत्रकारिता करना थोड़ा मुश्किल काम होता जा रहा है। और साथ ही साथ आप सत्य हिंदी का ऐप डाउनलोड करना न भूलें। और अब आज की बातचीत शुरू करते हैं। आज दरअसल हम बातचीत करना चाहते हैं पूर्व विदेश सचिव निरुपमा राव से, क्योंकि ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के बाद से कई बड़े सवाल खड़े हो गए हैं और भारत की विदेश नीति पर कुछ गहरे प्रश्न चिन्ह भी लगे हैं। इन गहरे प्रश्न चिन्हों को अंडरलाइन करते हुए आज हमने 10 सवालों पर बात करने का फैसला किया है। ये सवाल बड़े महत्वपूर्ण हैं और इन सवालों के मद्देनजर भारत की वर्तमान विदेश नीति, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मंचों पर भारत की स्थिति का एक अंदाजा भी लगेगा उनसे जिन्होंने खुद भारत की विदेश नीति को लंबे समय तक चलाया। जिसमें सवाल यह कि ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के बाद भारत की विदेश नीति किस हाल में है? क्या भारत अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मंच पर अलग थलग पड़ गया है? संकट के समय पुराना दोस्त रूस चुप क्यों रहा? चीन पाकिस्तान की इतनी मदद क्यों कर रहा है? और पांचवा सवाल है, भारत चीन और पाकिस्तान को अलग क्यों नहीं कर पाया? इसके साथ साथ सवाल नंबर 6, मोदी के प्रधानमंत्री बनने के बाद से भारत की विदेश नीति में क्या बदलाव आए हैं? 7 नंबर का सवाल, दुनिया के नक्शे पर भारत के सॉफ्ट पावर का क्या हुआ? IMF, ADB, वर्ल्ड बैंक ने भारत की अनसुनी कर पाकिस्तान को आर्थिक पैकेज क्यों दिए? उभरते चीन और बददिमाग ट्रंप के बीच भारत अपनी विदेश नीति कैसे चलाए? और भारत क्यों ट्रंप को करारा जवाब नहीं देता है? जी हाँ, ये 10 सवाल है जिन पर करेंगे बातचीत। निरुपमा जी, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है हमारे इस विशेष कार्यक्रम में। खासतौर पर इसलिए भी क्योंकि पहली बार आप सत्य हिंदी के साथ जुड़ रही हैं। आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। तो बहुत बेसिक सा सवाल है, अगर आपसे पूछूं कि भाई आज की तारीख में भारत की विदेश नीति की स्थिति क्या है, क्योंकि भारत दुनिया की 5वीं सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था है, दुनिया की फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी है, और उसके बावजूद भी एक परसेप्शन ये बनना कि भारत के अलग थलग तो पड़ता हुआ दिखाई नहीं पड़ रहा।
Thank you, Ashutosh ji, for inviting me on the show. आपके दर्शकों को I want to express my warm greetings. मैं इंग्लिश में जवाब दूंगी।
प्लीज
थोड़ा बहुत हिंदी जहां मैं बोल सकती हूँ, I'll add.
Let me repeat my question in English. The first question is, after Operation Sindoor, why the perception is that India is isolated at the world level?
हाँ, पहले मैं I'll try my response in हिंदी. इंडिया ने जो रिस्पॉन्स दिया ऑपरेशन सिंदूर में, वो काफी स्ट्रॉन्ग और कंट्रोल्ड था। और इंडिया ने जो क्लियरली बोला कि ये टेरर के अगेंस्ट एक्शन था और किसी भी सॉवरन नेशन, जैसे पाकिस्तान का एग्जाम्पल हम ले लेंगे, के खिलाफ वॉर नहीं थी। और यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, इजराइल जैसे कंट्रीज ने इंडिया के सेल्फ डिफेंस स्टैंस को सपोर्ट किया, जबकि चाइना और कुछ मुस्लिम कंट्रीज, टर्की और मलेशिया फॉर एग्जांपल, पाकिस्तान के साथ थे। लेकिन यूनाइटेड नेशंस और OIC, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ इस्लामिक कोऑपरेशन जैसे फोरम्स में इंडिया ने पाकिस्तान को आइसोलेट करने में काफी हद तक सक्सेस पाई। So I'm trying to express it in Hindi for your viewers.
Please go ahead in English. No problem. Absolutely no problem.
So what I wanted to say in English was India's diplomacy post Operation Sindoor has been quite calibrated, and it has been rooted in the counter-terrorism narrative. For instance, all the multi-party delegations that went abroad focused on this. And by launching limited military strikes during Operation Sindoor, and avoiding escalation, because in all fairness, we must point to that. India did avoid escalation. And my assessment is that we projected strength without recklessness. So we framed the action as a defensive response to terror, as we should have, which earned us measured support from key global players. Now, internationally, what India did was to demonstrate operational maturity by engaging key partners, as I mentioned earlier, US, France, Gulf nations, while avoiding diplomatic isolation. And multilateral forums we called for restraint. And towards us, none of these countries ever condemned us for the actions we took. That must be kept in mind. And the operation affirmed our capacity, I believe, to act decisively while managing the global options that we had through disciplined diplomacy. That is because I've studied all the information that is there in the public domain. As you know, I don't serve in the government anymore. But on the basis of what I've been able to study and all the open sources that are available, this is my assessment.
Yeah. But the perception is that at least in favor of the Pakistan, there was the China, then Turkey and Azerbaijan, and up to a certain extent in the Colombia also. But nobody spoke in favor of India after the Operation Sindoor. Why so?
So what you're saying is, आप बोल रहे हैं कि इंडिया आज ग्लोबल स्टेज पे अकेला है और जब पाकिस्तान को कम से कम 3 कंट्रीज का ओपन सपोर्ट मिला. तो मेरे ख्याल में ये बिल्कुल सही नहीं है, क्योंकि इंडिया को यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, यूके, फ्रांस और इजराइल जैसे मेजर पावर्स का साइलेंट या डिप्लोमेटिक सपोर्ट मिला, और नेपाल जैसे नेबर्स भी इंडिया के एक्शन के फेवर में थे. पाकिस्तान को जो सपोर्ट मिला, चाइना, टर्की, मलेशिया, वो लिमिटेड और पॉलिटिकल था, नॉट ग्लोबल कंसेंसस. मोस्ट कंट्रीज न्यूट्रल रहे, बट उनका टिल्ट मेरे ख्याल में इंडिया के तरफ था. So what I'm trying to say is that Pakistan did receive open support, no doubt, from Turkey, Malaysia, and partial backing from China, at least overtly. But it's inaccurate to call India lonely. India had broader, though quieter, backing from the West, from the global South, most of the global South, and influential neighbors. Nepal and Sri Lanka, in my view, were more tilted towards India than to Pakistan. And let us also remember that many countries had condemned the terror attack in Pahalgam, and they affirmed India's right to self-defense. So most of the world, in my view, Ashutosh ji, took a neutral but sympathetic stance towards India, towards our limited operation, and they recognized the restraint that we observed. And unlike Pakistan's vocal backers, yes, Turkey and Malaysia were very vocal in their support for Pakistan, India benefited from wider systemic support geopolitically. And that didn't make headlines, I agree. That did not make headlines, but it helped blunt any diplomatic backlash for India. That is my assessment.
Nirupama, but the interesting question is that India was obviously the victim of terrorism, and Pakistan has been pursuing terrorism as a state policy for a very, very long time. In fact, almost 40 years. लेकिन उसके बावजूद भी पाकिस्तान को ओपन सपोर्ट मिलता और इंडिया को खुलकर लोगों ने सपोर्ट नहीं किया, despite realizing the fact that India is a victim and India has every right to self-defense. Why so?
And that is exactly what I said now. Pakistan got vocal support from a couple of countries, and that made the headlines. And a lot of people, particularly in India, were extremely alarmed because of that. But I think you have to sift through all this white noise, if I may call it, and go to the heart of the matter. And at the heart of the matter, India acted, first of all, in self-defense. It exercised restraint. It is the victim of terror. That was a reality recognized by the global community. So all this really tilted the balance in our favor. We have to look through this with sobriety, not with, I know there's been reactions, some of it bordering on hysteria about the kind of support that Pakistan received. But I think we must understand the realities and come to the conclusion that the balance was tilted in India's favor, although it was very quiet, understated support, but it was there and it definitely was of help to us.
Don't you think that Russia's silence during this crisis is intriguing?
Yes, I would. I was also, pondering about that. And Russia's very muted position. Russia ka jo silence एक diplomatic strategy थी. And if you look at what Russia was trying to do, I would say that they were kind of pulling off a strategic balancing act. Ukraine war के बाद Russia already global pressure में है. You understand, there's a lot of global pressure on Ukraine. And though historically close to India, Moscow avoided openly siding with us. I completely agree with what you're saying. And in fact, Russia ने openly किसी side लेना, I mean, they avoided it. They किसी side को लेने का choice they did not exercise. They condemned terror, but Pakistan ka naam avoid kiya. That was the issue here. They avoided the name. And we should realize that there is an alignment today that Russia has with China. Russia-China alliance jo hai, that no holds barred partnership. That is what it is called. तो ये एक reality है. और चाइना के साथ वो अलाइन रहना चाहता है रशिया, and that I think was something that certainly caused eyebrows to be raised in New Delhi. But the silence, again, Ashutosh ji, was it opposition to India? No, I think in all objectivity, it was not opposition to India. But Russia, I think, mere khayal mein wanted to preserve influence on both sides. And I'm sure, I don't have the information, but my hunch is that Russia did engage in some back-channel diplomacy also. It is not, evident to us. It is not visible to the naked eye. But I think there was some back-channel, movements that took place. But again, what all this underscores is that there has been a shift in Russia's priorities. Very transactional, multipolar diplomacy over any historical loyalty that it had to India. Now, you may ask, could Moscow have supported India more? And I think, yes, Moscow could have expressed clearer support for India, given the long-standing strategic partnership. But however, there's been a deepening dependence on China post-Ukraine war, and emerging military ties and energy ties with Pakistan also. And this has conditioned the diplomatic posture of Russia. So Russia, in other words, is pursuing a very hedging strategy, a diplomatic hedging strategy. If they had supported India, I think their view is that China would have been irritated. They would have disrupted the new partnership with Pakistan. This kind of triangulation. And it has exposed the limits, and let me be frank and honest here, it has exposed the limits in the Indo-Russian partnership today. It has exposed the limits, and I believe India should recognize it by now.
So you mean to say that India has every reason to be disappointed by the Russian response? But the question is, how intriguing this is, the alignment of the Russia with the China, and the China supposedly not a friendly country, not a friendly neighbor, and then the China almost openly supporting Pakistan during the Operation Sindoor. And with such two countries, if Russia seemed to be aligning with them, is it a matter of concern for us?
It is a reality. As I said, it's a kind of triangulation we have to take into account. Now, global geopolitics, works in very strange ways today. We have a very fractured global order. We have new alignments. There are new poles in the world order. It's a multipolar geography as far as geopolitics is concerned. And I think the alignments that have shifted in terms of Russia and China coming closer together, Russia coming under pressure because of the Ukraine war, Russia is hedging today, and it is being much more transactional than it was in the past. So the historical loyalties that define the Russia-India relationship, we should not just put them as the North Star. That can't be the main direction of our compass, because there's been a shift, there have been changes in the situation, and we have to take it into account and build stronger coalitions and partnerships with other friends to take into account this new imbalance that has occurred. But having said that, I'm not saying we should jettison our relationship with Russia. It is still very, very important to us. And I don't believe there are any signs that would suggest that this is a relationship that has somehow been weakened at its foundations. But there is a transactionalism today that we have to take into account.
But how do you perceive this open support by China to Pakistan and this very close alliance between China and the Pakistan? Should India be really worried about it, and what India should be doing?
इसमें मेरा simple जवाब ये है strategic interest that China and Pakistan have for each other. For instance, the China-Pakistan economic corridor जो है, it's China का crown jewel है. BRI जो है उनके Belt and Road Initiative का crown jewel है. और पाकिस्तान चाइना के लिए एक very loyal partner है. इंडिया को रीजनल डोमिनेंस से रोक रखता है. दैट इज दिस सपोर्ट. एंड और बोनस ये है कि पाकिस्तान कभी भी चाइना के इंटरनल मैटर्स पे जैसे शिनजियांग पे कमेंट नहीं करता. एंड दैट आई थिंक द चाइनीज वैल्यू वेरी मच. सो इट अलाउज इन चाइना दिस अलायंस विद पाकिस्तान. इट अलाउज चाइना टू टाई डाउन इंडिया रीजनली and gain access to the Arabian Sea, especially through the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And there are very deep military, nuclear, economic, and diplomatic cooperation relationships that China has with Pakistan. And this is a reality we have not been able to change. This is, augmented itself over the last 6 decades. It began in 1963 when China and Pakistan signed that so-called Sino-Pakistan boundary agreement, and Pakistan actually handed over territory in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir to China. So it began like that, but over the years, it has grown in proportion and strength and substance, and it seeks to tie us down in the region.
So what should be done? आपको क्या लगता है? क्योंकि दो थिएटर ऑफ वॉर्स एक तरीके से खुल गए हैं. एक तरफ चाइना का है, दूसरी तरफ पाकिस्तान का है, और दोनों काफी हद तक हॉस्टाइल भी हैं. And there is a perception that the China is trying to encircle India around its boundaries, whether it's Sri Lanka or the Bangladesh or the Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, anywhere. What should be done as a matter of strategy? Because a few people I spoken to earlier, they think India needs something like Henry Kissinger kind of a thing, when you can go and have an alliance with your the biggest enemy in the world, like Americans and Chinese coming together in 1971-72 was something unthinkable, but that was done.
I haven't really plotted that scenario as yet, but आपका सवाल ये है, why can't India decouple China from Pakistan? And इतना strong support क्यों कर रहा है China पाकिस्तान को? And ये alliance तो काफी deep rooted और long term है, जैसे मैंने अभी बताया आपको. और चाइना को पाकिस्तान से जो स्ट्रेटेजिक फायदा मिलता है वो इंडिया से नहीं मिल सकता. There is no doubt about it, because our relationship with China is so different. और इंडिया देना भी नहीं चाहता है ऐसे this kind of support and strategic फायदा. और इंडिया और चाइना राइवल्स है, और पाकिस्तान चाइना के लिए एक रिलायबल जूनियर पार्टनर है. इंडिया कैन नेवर बी एनीबॉडीज जूनियर पार्टनर. एंड ये रिलेशनशिप काम करता है, चाइना पाकिस्तान रिलेशनशिप जो है. सो इफ यू आर आस्किंग मी वेदर वी कैन decouple this relationship, my answer would be that this bond between China and Pakistan, it is structural. That is why it is structural, and it's not a simple transaction. कि आज हम ये करेंगे, we'll do this for you, you do that for us tomorrow. It's a very structural relationship. And the unfortunate reality, Ashutosh ji, is that we lack the leverage. हमारे पास वो जो leverage नहीं है to offer China a better deal without compromising on our own autonomy and our own independence and our own regional role. And after Galwan के बाद आपने देखा है जो trust deficit है इंडिया और चाइना के बीच में. So we see this engagement with China, any engagement with China, particularly after Operation Sindoor, it will be much more, because China was actively assisting Pakistan during this operation, saying very little, but actually in concrete terms assisting China. So we have to see the engagement with China through a lens of caution. They cannot not be convergence with China. That is the we have to contend.
And also with a sense of historical being betrayed in the past.
Well, yes, the fact is, yes, and the border problem continues to be unresolved, and across the line of actual control, there are thousands of troops massed on each side. Although disengagement agreements have been put in place since last October, the situation has definitely become less tense. But the fact is that there are many contradictions in our relationship with China today.
निरुपा जी, आप बहुत ही कामयाब फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी रही हैं, वेरी रिस्पेक्टेड फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी. आज जो स्थिति भारत की है, बिकॉज इंडिया इज फेस्ड विद अ राइजिंग चाइना एंड अ वेरी वॉलेटाइल ट्रम्प, this has never happened with India. Even during the Cold War period, at least India had a support of the Soviet Union or a very trusted friend, and even had a very vocal voice among the third world countries. He was a leader of the non-aligned movement. But with rising China, who is hostile to India, and a volatile Trump which can't be trusted, भारत को क्या करना चाहिए? भारत की विदेश नीति को कैसे आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए?
India is definitely facing a difficult geopolitical balancing act. There is no doubt about it. We have to manage. Ek taraf we have a hostile China, and then we have, of course, Mr. Trump's leadership today in the United States that we have to deal with literally on a day-to-day basis, because it tends to be unpredictable, and the multilateral order is fraying. So we have to adapt, and India, I believe, is adapting. I wrote recently that India's position is liminal. English में एक शब्द है, liminal. We are on the threshold, really. We are not in the darkness. We are not in the light. We are on the threshold. We are on the threshold of becoming a leading great power. So today, I think we have to act as a bridge. That is what our strategic autonomy does. It acts as a bridge between East and West, even between, with China. We engage with them in BRICS, we engage with them in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. On multilateral forums, on many occasions, India and China have similar positions. It's actually in the bilateral context and regional context that there are insecurities, that there are tensions, and there are differences. So India's balancing act, I think, is quite noteworthy, and so far we have been able to walk that tightrope. India has been able to walk that tightrope. We have very diversified relationships with different countries, and our diplomacy is definitely issue-based. If you hear Dr. Jaishankar, he talks of issue-based diplomacy. So this is an in-betweenness. It's a kind of, I don't know if the word would be a Trishanku kind of situation. But this gives us leverage. This position, it may sound like we are an acrobat on a tightrope, but it gives us a leverage in a very fluid world today. And India, I think, is seen as a credible, responsible country, and we are able to interact with different countries across the world in different situations. And as I said, safeguard our interests, especially on issues of concern to us. Sorry, I lost you.
I'm saying how to deal with Mr. Trump. On a daily basis, he's saying that he has mediated between India and Pakistan, not once, but almost 10, 11 times. And he's trying to, in a way, internationalize Kashmir. In one of his tweets, he said that. How to deal with a man like this?
तो ट्रम्प की मीडिएशन स्टेटमेंट्स के बारे में आप बोल रहे हैं कि हम कैसे हमने ओपनली रिएक्ट क्यों नहीं किया. इंडिया का वेरी क्लियर स्टैंस है. पाकिस्तान के साथ सारे इश्यूज बायलैटरल है. हमने कई बार इसको दोहराया है. और ट्रम्प के स्टेटमेंट्स को इंडिया ने इग्नोर किया इसीलिए क्योंकि पब्लिकली रिएक्ट करना अननेसेसरी नॉइज क्रिएट करता है. और इंडिया ने क्वाइट डिप्लोमेसी को चूज किया है so that we can keep the focus on real policy issues, because there are many policy issues between India and the United States, and it's a very multifaceted, comprehensive global strategic partnership. और the decision मुझे लग रहा है MEA में और गवर्नमेंट में ये डिसीजन लिया होगा कि यूएस के साथ हमारे टाइज को क्यों स्ट्रेन करना है. इतने सारे there are so many things at stake here. So we have expressed our position very clearly that these are bilateral issues that India and Pakistan must resolve between themselves. There's no room for a third party in this, and that's been made quite clear. I agree with you. We did not take a drum and beat it, constantly, and I don't think we need to do that as a big country and as a mature democracy and a country that enjoys very, very good relations with the United States. Very good. It's a solid relationship with strong foundations, and we have built on it over the last 2.5 decades. So why fritter away all that? I think it is in our interest, to safeguard what has been achieved in the relationship. And I think the Americans have got the message, have definitely got the message of where we stand on this particular issue.
How you see Mr. Modi's foreign policy? Because he all through in his 11 years, he's trying to project as a very assertive foreign policy. A prime minister who likes to have a very personalized diplomacy. He likes to hug every top leader in the world. And so, how if you have to make a difference between Mr. Manmohan Singh's time of foreign policy and Mr. Modi's time of foreign policy, so this assertive foreign policy, do you think it really goes along with the India's rising status in the world, or we should be more quieter?
Well, I think the leadership styles are very different between Dr. Manmohan Singh and Mr. Narendra Modi, and we all recognize that. That is a reality that we have come to accept. So, ये हम कह सकते हैं कि Mr. Modi's foreign policy is definitely more assertive, if I may use the word, than the policies that we had followed. Although there is no substantive difference in the content and the orientation of our foreign policy, to be very honest. There are certain basic fundamentals that continue to underpin our foreign policy, and India continues to have good relationships with many countries in the world. The neighborhood first policy is something that we had always sought to follow, regardless of change of governments. Definitely, Mr. Modi's foreign policy is assertive, but I wouldn't. Some have referred to it as aggressive. I wouldn't call it aggressive. और इंडिया ने अपने इंटरेस्ट को स्ट्रांगली प्रोटेक्ट किया है, जैसे व्हेन इट कम्स टू पाकिस्तान एंड टेरर, जैसे हमारे सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक्स है, बालाकोट या ऑपरेशन सिंदूर, देयर इज अ सर्टेन desire obviously expressed and conveyed that we will strongly protect our interests. और साथ ही क्वाड जैसे कोलिशंस है या G20 जैसे फोरम्स में इंडिया ने ग्लोबल लीडरशिप का रोल भी एक्टिवली लिया है. सो दिस इज द काइंड ऑफ सिचुएशन that we see. There's very much stronger signaling, I think, in this foreign policy of Mr. Modi, and a very confident diplomatic messaging, no doubt about it. There's a certain confidence and an air of confidence, let us say, in the manner in which we convey this. So there's a nationalism, definitely. Nationalism there is, but there's also pragmatism and assertion of sovereignty. I think that has become much more important in this government than ever before. It's not that previous governments did not protect us, preserve our sovereignty, but this stated intention that we will assert and we will protect our sovereignty and expand our global influence. I think that is much more in evidence today than in the past. So very calculated actions, I would say, especially on terror, on borders. These are calculated actions. But at the same time, while being much more assertive, I don't believe there's aggression because we are trying to control escalation. There is always this approach that escalation has to be controlled. And that dialogue ultimately, like you have a ceasefire, for instance, it has to come through communication between the two sides. So we're not at all trigger happy. I wouldn't say that.
That's okay, but don't you think the India-Pakistan relationship, as is being criticized, has been hyphenated again, and that now there is a false equivalence between India and Pakistan, and thanks to you can say this big Operation Sindoor and the way Mr. Trump is talking on a daily basis?
Well, I'll give you a simple answer to that. I mean, hyphenation happens when you have conflict hostilities, tensions between India and Pakistan, not in any other context. India has moved far ahead by leaps and bounds. It's no longer in the same class or category or group as Pakistan. But the point is, when there is conflict or the threat of conflict or tension between two neighbors that are nuclear armed, it becomes the world's problem, Ashutosh. It becomes the world's problem. So people will start saying India and Pakistan, India, Pakistan. What's happening? We must have tensions must reduce. Both sides must exercise restraint. So the hyphenation happens. But now 3 weeks after Sindoor and the ceasefire, where's the hyphenation? So the hyphenation comes in the context of this military tensions between India and Pakistan, not in the larger context. Of course, we are both South Asian nations, partitioned by history. And in my view, India always should keep a little space, a little opening in the door with Pakistan, because we can't, India is not a nation that ever built walls with other countries. And I can't imagine a great wall of India on the western border, really. They cannot be. Ultimately, the people of India and Pakistan will communicate with each other, will do business with each other. And that is the weight and the inheritance of history that is with us. But as long as terror is an instrument of policy practiced by Pakistan, India has every legitimate and genuine and concrete reason to resist it and make it clear that until this problem is satisfactorily resolved by Pakistan, there cannot be normal relations between the two countries.
निरुपमा जी, एक सवाल यहाँ पे है वो ये कि पिछले दिनों हमने देखा कि किस तरीके से IMF ने, वर्ल्ड बैंक ने और ADB ने पाकिस्तान को बेल आउट पैकेजेस दिए और भारत के ऊपर ये आरोप लग रहा है कि इंडिया एक तरीके से पाकिस्तान को टेररिस्ट स्टेट बनाने में नाकामयाब रहा है. इट्स अ फेलियर ऑफ इंडिया. इट्स सीन एज अ फेलियर ऑफ इंडिया बिकॉज इंडिया कुड नॉट tell the whole world what the Pakistan is doing with us, and despite that Pakistan is getting these bailout packages.
I think that's quite a simplistic view, because it's quite understandable that many members of the public are not really exposed to the intricacies of the functioning of organizations like the IMF and the ADB. तो ये जो IMF और ADB जो है, उसका मकसद जो है कंट्रीज को कोलैप्स से बचाना होता है, इकोनॉमिक कोलैप्स. तो वही मकसद है, और उसका मकसद जियोपॉलिटिक्स नहीं है जैसे हम सोचते हैं, वैसा नहीं है. और पाकिस्तान को जो पैसा मिला है वो बहुत हार्ड कंडीशंस के साथ था, बहुत हार्ड कंडीशनैलिटीज के साथ था. कोई फ्री गिफ्ट नहीं था. It was not a free gift to Pakistan. So we should keep that in mind. So the idea was they want to prevent economic collapse. They don't want to reward. It's not a reward for Pakistan. I think you must understand that. And we didn't oppose these packages publicly. That's true. India did not oppose these packages. But we did not oppose that because doing so would have risked appearing obstructive. In a situation where a country may have serious economic difficulties, whatever the case may be with Pakistan, obviously, asphyxiating, cutting off all oxygen to that country affects everything in the region. I think we should keep that in mind and take a more mature approach to this. And I think the likely conclusion was that we didn't want a bankrupt Pakistan at our doorstep. It's not going to, be good for us. It's going to create a lot of volatility in the regional situation if that happens. So that's what our approach was. यही मैं बताना चाहती हूँ to your audience.
But India did argue that the money, the bailout package is given to the Pakistan that might be used for terrorist purposes, to destabilize India.
I mean, that may be a kind of a generic view that, if Pakistan gets arms from the United States, we've always maintained that there's every likelihood of these arms being used against India. But in the case of economic assistance from the IMF, which is development centered, there's no way these funds can be diverted, for military purposes. There's just no way. The way these loans are structured, the way the conditions are applied, the way there's oversight from these organizations. It's a very long-term relationship, that has probably gone on from the early post-independence years. So I think from that point of view, the position that India took was the right position.
Nirupama, what is the way out for India? Like India is faced with terrorism for the last more than 4 decades. What should India be doing?
So, I was thinking about this because I kind of sensed you might ask this question, and it has also been, in a sense, troubling me for the last few weeks since Pahalgam happened. So I thought to myself, why don't we have an alliance, India-led alliance of about 20 countries, let's say just 20 countries from the global south, who are united by a shared vulnerability to terrorism. We can perhaps call it the T20. Nothing to do with cricket, but we call the T20. It's a dedicated multilateral platform where we have intelligence cooperation between these countries, ये countries के बीच में, and condemnation of terror attacks wherever they happen, whichever part of the world. Building capacity, because many countries in the global south need to build capacity to fight terrorism. And we kind of shape the global norms on counter-terrorism. ये इंडिया का शायद मुझे लग रहा है कि ये बहुत अच्छा opportunity और time है इंडिया को ऐसे initiative लेने के लिए. Because existing global institutions जो है बहुत slow moving है और western narratives जो है वो dominate करते हैं जो existing forums में. और हम अपने strategic autonomy, we take a lot of pride in our strategic autonomy. और global south पे maybe हमारा position or approach, we are treated with a lot of credibility. So I believe we are well positioned to lead such an effort, and this T20 can function as a diplomatic coalition, an informal bloc within the UN and G20. And I was thinking of countries like Indonesia, very important country for us, UAE, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, Mali in Africa, Brazil. Mali, you see, is part of the Sahel. The Sahel is very badly affected by terrorism. Brazil is an important partner for us in the global south. Philippines has a lot of terror problems. Mexico, the situation. Israel, South Africa, and Fiji as a partner in the Pacific. Kazakhstan for Central Asia, Sri Lanka for South Asia, Sri Lanka. During Operation Sindoor ke time mein or after Pahalgam also, Sri Lanka was one of the countries in the neighborhood that said, we will not let our territory to be used for terrorism. Very important, I think that was. And it was a statement of support, to my mind, for the position that India took. And Ethiopia, we can include Morocco, Thailand, Jordan, and Vietnam. So 20 countries. And we can have these annual summits hosted by the member nations, a joint task force for real-time intelligence and cyber threat. Because cyber threats terrorism is, cyber threats have also crept into this whole operational calculus of terrorism. And we have we can create this unified diplomatic voice against state-sponsored terrorism. Ye jo Pahalgam ke baad, in that sense, we were, of course, a lone voice, saying that we have become victims. We have been constantly the target from Pakistan for terrorism attacks. And that was our refrain. We tried to, broadcast it to the world. But if we have a coalition of this nature, there would be many, many more voices behind us. And I think it would lend a lot of weight and credibility without any military entanglement. And we are kind of able to strengthen our global south identity on terrorism, because today there is a gap in the institutional response to terror. Because you have United Nations, Financial Action Task Force, Interpol, Global Counterterrorism Force, but this proposed 20 against terrorism, T20, 20 against terrorism, it would fill very specific strategic and operational gaps, and it would have a very distinct mandate, action-oriented mandate, and centered around the needs and realities of the global south. And that was my suggestion, and I don't know whether the government.
I think it's a great idea, a nice turn of phrase, T20. May I ask you, have you pressed this idea to the government of India?
No, I have not, to be honest. I think your show was the inspiration for this in many senses. preparing for this interview, of course, in the last few weeks, I've been doing a lot of writing on the issue, and some of my op-eds have appeared, as you know, in the Hindu and Indian Express, and I continue to write on such matters. So I've been thinking, why should India be an isolated voice on this issue? Because it is such a legitimate concern. No country can oppose it. And if we were to create such a global South, it's a global South coalition.
Yeah.
We want to be a leading voice of the global South. Aapko yaad hai that we had these summits of the global South at the time of G20 and later. So why not, come up with this kind of a forum where it focuses on our security concerns. These are our legitimate security concerns, whether it is India, whether it is Mali, whether it is Mexico. These are all very serious issues that we face within the domestic political context, as also on the external front across, because it comes across from borders. So create a unified voice, particularly from the global South, where we could speak without hesitation on these issues, and especially focus on cyber terror. Cyber terror जो है, और ये radicalization of technology. आप ये term use कर सकते हैं, the radicalization of technology. I think these are all going to be huge concerns for the security policy of any nation, and particularly for us in the global South, because we are developing, and that there are many schools of thought contending here, and there are many threats to our stability and to the welfare of our people. So look at things like cyber terrorism, dark web mein jo hai, radicalization, drone warfare. You know how drones were used in the recent hostilities. Terrorist crypto financing. Terrorists jo hai, they're doing a lot of crypto financing, and it goes beyond the immediate scope of counterterrorism bodies, what you see today. So this can become a very agile, non-bureaucratic, lean alliance, and very, it can allow for fast and flexible and very targeted response when we have crises of this nature. Not that we should fight together, but we can resist. We can resist together. That, English has that nuance. We can resist such things together.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया निरूपमा जी, और उम्मीद करता हूं कि आपकी इन बातों को सरकार में कोई सुन रहा होगा और फिर इस पर अमल करने की कोशिश करेगा. आई थिंक इट्स अ ग्रेट आइडिया, और जरूर इस पे कुछ ना कुछ कार्रवाई होनी चाहिए. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, धन्यवाद.
थैंक यू.